Like Martin said, I'd like to talk a little bit about, the development we've seen in Accenture in identity and access management, and a little bit about the priorities and the choices that big organizations have in this space. We've got 20 minutes for this. I'm hoping there'll be some good questions coming in so that we can take out of the pub time potentially for everyone. But if not, hopefully it can stand alone as well. So, like Martin said, there was a very long and complex title to this, but I tried to just call it simplified because, frankly, that's what we need to do with identity. In terms of who I am, so I've got two roles in Accenture. I've been working in identity for quite a long time. I run our European identity and access management business in Europe, or digital identity as we call it. I also run our energy and resources security business in UK and Ireland. So those are my two main hats in Accenture. I also like doodling and boxing and, going to concerts or whatever, traveling and so forth. So the intro slide gives you a little bit of a sense of that. But today we're talking about identity. So what is it really that we're trying to achieve with identity? And I think identity and access management has been interesting because I very quickly took an interest in identity back in 2006 when I started getting access to this. And it was really because security was very difficult to really engage with our clients. Our clients didn't really care too much about security. It was a side thing. But identity, they did care about. There was a big operational piece to identity, and for that reason, there was a lot of, very willing participants in discussions on identity. That has changed tremendously. 10, 15 years ago, we didn't really see security being discussed that much with identity and access management, apart from a few specific, very highly regulated, typically industries. So from our point of view, well, it's really positive that security has taken the center stage on this, but it's also it's important to remember the operational side to this. So the audience here will know what identity is, so I won't spend too much time on that. But it's the usual kind of stuff. It's provisioning, deprovisioning, segregation of duties, recertification campaigns, having a single source of truth of who's doing what and so forth. And that's really what we're trying to do. The outcomes, well, oftentimes in the past was compliance, but actually more and more it's around security risk reduction. We still have the operational angle, enabling people to actually work in a timely manner and have access to what they need to and not what they don't need. So the sort of general outcomes are still very similar to what we're used to. But I think what is really happening and what has made a massive difference is the way that our clients, the way organizations procure technology, the way they engage with technology. So first of all, a lot more organizations now see IT and technology as a core part of their business. In order for them to be successful, they really need to be doing agile technology transformation. They need to be doing digital interactions with their customers, with the B2B and so forth. And that really requires a very different approach to integration. The other thing is obviously the cloud. So the cloud has enhanced a challenge that we've seen for many years in the legacy side of things, but has actually increased the challenge manyfold. So an old client of mine once called identity a CISO killer, because the CISOs oftentimes didn't do big business transformations. They would engage in a conversation about identity, they would get a budget, and then they would struggle. It was very difficult to get the business to engage. It was very difficult to get the right outcomes. Oftentimes these big identity projects stranded on 10, 15 business applications integrated, in some cases maybe 100, but 100 out of thousands. So the identity challenge was very real, and actually the ability to show and evidence that there was value from identity 10 years ago was a huge challenge. And we still have the legacy, we still have the business applications. None of that has changed, but what we have now is a very different change of pace, or we've got a change of pace to a much more aggressive pace. We've also got a bunch of access situation in the hyperscalers, in the infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, which is actually not very well addressed, and which a lot of owners of identity, a lot of owners of business services and service operations needs to start taking very, very serious. And for that reason, identity needs to be much, much more integrated into our platforms of choice. And then obviously, as part of this, there's a big question on the people. There's a big question on the users of these services. So one of the things that we've seen, traditionally identity management has been very much a top-down sort of application-driven and silo-driven transformation program. It's been very much an integration challenge. And what we're seeing now is actually that is not tenable and that's not suitable for our clients, in as much as if you actually want to reduce your attack surface, if you want to reduce your risk, it's not good enough to integrate 10% or 5% of your important business systems. It's also not to settle for less, i.e. to just say, well, we'll just do the business systems, but what we won't do is the infrastructure accesses. We won't recertify access to the cloud providers that we've got and the SaaS solutions that we've got and so forth. So we are going to have to move away from this sort of very one-by-one integration approach into a much more factory-driven approach and a much more accelerated approach. And in order to be successful with that, and in order to manage to do that in big, fast-changing organizations, well, we need to start leveraging some of the capabilities of the platforms that we use. And obviously, I've spoken a bit about the hyperscalers. That they're obviously very important. So how do we actually integrate and do identity governance for the Googles of the world, the AWSs and Azure and so forth? But actually, when we look at this, and I know that this has been a big topic on the conference today, well, how do we leverage the existing interface, our IT service management tooling, to actually increase that engagement and enable our customers better, our internal customers, our employees and our contractors to work faster, work more agile, and actually get a nicer experience. And that's really where this integration into the platform comes in. One thing that I do think it's worth pausing on here. So we've got, as I said, we've seen a major shift away from operational business cases for identity management to much more security-driven business cases. And one of the conversations that I have with a lot of my clients, a lot of the CISOs, oftentimes heads of risk, COOs, CFOs, is actually, well, what is identity management in that? What is the importance of this control? And one of the challenges, and one of my personal bugbears as a security expert rather than as an identity individual, has been that our clients have oftentimes, they bought a tool. They had an audit finding. They bought a tool. In this case, this could be an identity management tool. They integrated that to their HR. They integrated it to their IT service management tool, and they onboarded the applications that the finding related to. This is a good way of closing an audit finding, but it's a terrible way of managing your attack surface. And this is really where I think identity management needs to start scaling. And this is where we need to start integrating identity management in everything we do. And this is where ServiceNow can be a great entry point for that, because you already have the relationships and the interaction with the users and your employees and your contractors through ServiceNow. But what it means is actually you need to move away from looking at these individual applications and actually say, well, it's pretty likely that an attacker will come in not through the critical application directly. They will find a softer landing spot. They'll find somewhere nice they can land, and then they'll move laterally. They'll move, they'll start escalating the privilege and the ability of access that they'll have, and they'll use that to get into the critical systems. So from my point of view, a really big driver for us having an integrated approach to identity is to have that ability to actually secure the identities across. There's a lot of talk of zero trust approaches, and a lot of talk. I've grown up in public sector security quite a lot, so a lot of talk of defense in depth. And identity and access management is actually absolutely core to being able to do these things. I'll move on to my to my sort of final slide here. Well, I've got one more slide just to mention what Accenture does, but that won't take too long. But so in terms of the choices and decisions that we have, one is the balance between the legacy and the new platform doing IT. And most of the clients that I work with in the identity space don't have the luxury of saying, we won't do legacy, we won't do the old school applications on premise in our data center. You have to do both. And what that really means for a decision maker in IT is that you need to find a balance. You need to find a balance between how deep you go with your integrations, because we can all we can all get excited about T codes, transaction codes, and SAP and so forth. But actually, there's got to be a balance between what does good look like, what is a good set of identity capabilities, and on the other side is, well, actually, how can we leverage a more pragmatic approach to identity to then reduce the challenges of that integration. The other side of this is the user experience, and I have fielded over the last, 8 years, so many questions of, does ServiceNow do identity management? And ServiceNow has been telling the story that they do, but every time we looked into it, well, they really didn't do the provisioning. They had obviously the workflows, but they didn't really do segregation of duties. There wasn't really a recertification capability. We work, as you can imagine, with most of the big identity management vendors, and we work with some of the new entrants, and Clear Skye, who's one of the sponsors of this, is one of those entrants. And actually, there's a very natural play there. There's a very natural integration point where, well, how do we actually give the user a natural way of engaging with what access they're given, when it's revoked, and so forth. And ServiceNow is definitely a natural point for that. And then I guess my final point, before I just give a quick summary of who Accenture is, my final point would be just reinforcing the cybersecurity and cyber resilience. It's no longer good enough to look at individual controls, i.e. access or provisioning of access, deprovisioning of access, segregation of duty, in a limited part of your infrastructure. All organizations need to start expecting that they're going to get either targeted for an attack or attacked and breached. And the way we can control and mitigate this, one way we can control and mitigate this, is put identity under control across your environments, across your cloud, and across your, if you have OT and ICS systems, then across that as well, but also, of course, the business applications. So having said that, I'll hand over to a QA. And while Martin, while you look for the questions, I'll just give a little bit of summary of what Accenture does in this space. So you'll probably know of us, big IT services company, about 1,800 people in identity, both in managed services and transformation, in consulting and so forth. But having not to make too fine a point on that, Martin, was there any questions, please?